Stand back there. It's up to you. Welcome to the July 21st meeting of this Crescent City City Council. We just returned from closed session, and I'd like to ask Council Rice, do we have anything to report out of closed session?
No actions taken this evening.
Thank you. So moving on, again, I've called the meeting to order. Would you please call the roll again?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Ania.
Here.
Councilmember Shalong.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau.
Here.
Mayor Hawley.
Here.
And let the record reflect that Councilmember Murray is absent.
Thank you. So would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Ron Gastineau.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you, and that's my first correction. It's Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau. Okay, so moving on then, under acknowledgements, we have none. I do want to express, though, that we had a council member and others that have expressed sadness over the passing of Bob Burchell. Bob and his family were long-term contributors to this community, and he will be missed. So, moving on to the consent calendar, yes.
We also lost former CHP I think it was a commander. Was he a commander? No. Okay. Johnny Jones recently.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the consent calendar, we have the approval of the regular meeting minutes from July 7th, receiving and filing the warrant claims list for the period July 8th through July 21st, and receiving and filing the biweekly, that's easy for me to say, biweekly payroll reports for the period ending June 30, 2014, and paid on July 3rd, and ending July 12th, 2014, and paid on July 18, 2014. So the consent calendar is before us. Are there any public comments on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Very good. Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar in whole. Would you please poll the vote?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shalong.
Yes.
Councilmember Ania.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau.
Yes.
And Mayor Hawley.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So we have a very special presentation this evening. We're going to consider and approve a resolution entitled Resolution Number 2014-30, a resolution of the City of Crescent City recognizing the retirement of Douglas Plack, Chief of Police, and honoring him for 11 years of an outstanding service to the City of Crescent City. So Mr. Plack is present. Yes, there you are. That's where you usually are at this point in time. I would like to ask Councilmember Shalong to actually read the resolution to everyone present. Thank you.
We'll see if I can get through this. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to everybody that's here tonight to honor a pretty incredible man. It means a lot to us as a council. Resolution number 2014-30, a resolution of the City of Crescent City recognizing the retirement of Douglas Plack, Chief of Police, and honoring him for his 11 years of outstanding service to the City of Crescent City. Whereas Chief Plack started his law enforcement career while serving our country in the United States Coast Guard. After his honorable discharge, Chief Plack became a police officer for the Borough of New Milford Police Department, New Jersey, 1974. In 1976, Chief Plack then completed 23 years of service with the City of Arvada, Colorado Police Department, working various positions, retiring in 2000 as detective assigned to the Criminal Investigations Unit. Whereas, having a desire to travel further west, in 2000, Chief Plack worked for the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department assigned to the Detective Division. He then brought his work ethic and desire to succeed to the Crescent City Police Department in September 2003. And whereas Chief Plack was hired in September 2003 as a police lieutenant for the city of Crescent City, in November 2003 appointed Chief of Police serving the city. During these many years of successful service, Chief Plack distinguished himself within the community by being involved in many community organizations and accessibility to the public through his Chatting with the Chief program and weekly radio messages. And whereas his passion for the community, commitment to service, and preparing the police department for the future never wavered through the difficult financial times during his tenure. And whereas Chief Plack is recognized for his accomplishments in establishing lasting programs that benefit the community. The Crime-Free Multi-Housing Program, the Gang Resistance Education and Training, the K-9 Program, and the Dogs Detecting Drugs Discreetly Program, always trying to add additional officers on the street, Debbie the Traffic Decoy Program was established. And whereas Chief Plack pursued education to enhance his own capabilities, ultimately graduating from the 227th session of the prestigious Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy, obtaining a Bachelor of Arts degree in Administration of Criminal Justice. Chief Plack has also been an educator and instructor in law enforcement since 1995. Now therefore, the City Council of the City of Crescent City does hereby express its sincere appreciation and gratitude to Chief of Police Douglas Plack for 11 years of dedicated service to the city. We wish him enjoyment of retirement and all of the things he'll do for Sharon and life to pursue his other passions. Signed by our City Clerk, Ms. Robin Patch, and our Mayor, Richard Hawley.
Thank you. There's more.
Okay. Thank you for reading that. That's a impressive resume, and we've been the recipients of that. We also are honored to have Mr. Tom Chapman, Chief Tom Chapman from the Arcata Police Department here to present a statement from the California Police Chiefs Association. Mr. Chapman, Chief Chapman, excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me to come up. On behalf of the California Police Chiefs Association, we would like to offer you this proclamation as a small token of our esteem and our appreciation, Doug, for all that you have done. I have known you practically my whole career, well, maybe not my whole career, but almost my whole career, and I consider you a friend and a mentor, and the things that you have done for local law enforcement can't be understated. We wish you the very best, and again, on behalf of the California Police Chiefs Association, we wish you well.
Okay. Thank you. Chief, you want to say a couple of words, or
If you don't mind.
just start your golf game?
May I turn this around, please?
Yeah, yes, tonight you may do that.
You know, thank you all for being here today. It's not a very good trait for a police chief, or any officer for that matter, to wear his emotions on his sleeve. It's always been a problem that I've had, so please bear with me. I don't mean to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But after all this time in law enforcement, you would think that you would have time to prepare for a day like this when it does come around, but you don't. When it's your passion to go into public service, much less public safety, too many things do take a priority. When I first attended the police academy in 1974, the New Jersey State Police drilled in our heads that you're considered as a rookie officer for 7 years. By that time, they figured out that you have experienced everything you were going to experience on the job. Well, boy, they were wrong. But here we are 40 years later, and I still haven't prepared for today. But I still do have a passion to want to serve you and wanted to tell you so much how much I appreciate your support, your encouragement, your thoughtful, sincere comments during my term. But I really want to instill in you how much that the trust that you had in me meant to me and my officers. But tonight we're short on time, so there's other city business that needs to be discussed. However, I would like to offer my genuine appreciation to the City Council, current and past, throughout the years for their insight and understanding in the complexity of police work. City staff and all allied law enforcement and partnering agencies, I would like to make this a safer and healthier community. Thank you. To my officers, excuse me. Thank you for believing in me and embracing the philosophy of community-oriented policing, and believing that it not only improves your citizens' quality of life, but the response that you receive from the public of appreciation will motivate you that much more to serve and protect the community and enjoy the profession where thank yous and notes of encouragement are few and far between. To the community, knowing how your community feels about you is paramount. Driving in a police car in the city where people wave at you with all their fingers is a sign of respect, knowing that it's a difficult job. I read the newspapers too about questionable acts and decisions that officers and departments make across the United States. However, I want to assure you that you have an excellent police department where your best interest is their primary concern. Respect them, support them, and get to know them better. Sharon, my wonderful wife, who has been there during difficult times by supporting me and making fun of me during good times. Thank you. I could not have gotten through this without you. And looking back in the partnership we have developed within our community, we have accomplished a lot together, all of us. And as a community, we're living in a higher quality of life here in Crescent City. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve you as your chief for the past 11 years. It's been quite a ride, but I would not have changed it for the world. Unfortunately, it's time to go. So with my sincere, heartfelt appreciation, all of you have left me with so many cherishable memories that I will never forget. And I can only hope that while I was your police chief, I have contributed in some way memories for you and your families, making you feel safe, secured, and believe that I have retired, leaving you with a police department that is truly a professional law enforcement agency that you can be proud of. So thank you and goodbye. Thank you.
Chief, we have one more thing for you.
Hard to see the chief cry. I thought I was the blubbering idiot the last month. On behalf of the city of Crescent City, we have the notorious, beautiful picture of one of the most amazing communities on the West Coast. And just a small token of appreciation from us to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Counselor, for every everything that you've done. Thank you, staff. Thank you, officers, explorers, all law enforcement agencies, Sharon, fire department, all of you that made my job a lot easier. I will hang this in the house and be proud of it. Kiss it as I walk by out the door driving my Cobra.
All right, that's what we like to hear. Thanks again, Chief.
Personally, I would just like to thank Mr. Plack. I've been on the council for almost 8 years now. I'll be done in November. I'll probably be getting one of those notorious pretty pictures that I can kiss and not go drive my Cobra. Doug has been a source of pride for our city. He's been a friend, he's been a mentor to me, and he's been a mentor to my son. Probably the most wonderful memories I'll have of him are of when my son needed someone to take him out and teach him to play baseball so that he could try out for Little League. Doug was the first one to sign up for that. And I'll always admire him and thank him for being a part of my life. And we're going to really, truly miss you in the city. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you. Other council comments?
You know, I just remember tonight when you brought it up that you went to the academy in 1974, and so did I in California. So it's nice to see someone that went to the academy at the same time. These, you know, I spent 30 years in law enforcement in California. The programs that you started here for a small town that are lasting today is monumental. The GREAT program, the crime-free multi-housing, those programs you really don't see in small-town America. And you brought that to us, and that's excellent. That's excellent, and I commend you for that. Those programs are hard to keep going. The K-9 program, and I know you've worked with a less than full staff for many, many years, but you made it work. And you know, before I got on the council, Chief, when I was a reserve officer, and I worked the football games with the guys and went out on patrol, every time that I was at the station and you were there, you always said, "Thank you for coming in." Never heard that any time in my police career. Thank you for coming in and thank you for volunteering. And I thank you for that. It meant a lot.
Thank you, Councilmember Nia. Mr. Gastineau?
My best memory of Doug is that he's always been approachable. I mean, you're a police chief, somebody in the community that you can go in and talk to, even if you aren't on the city council. Always working with the community. He's worked with lots of projects with us, with Rural Human Services, and he's always trying to do the best for the community. I applaud you for that, and I hope you have a very happy retirement.
And I'd just like to say, Doug, that as recently as today, we were in a meeting together, and you were absolutely eloquent when you explained the interactions of community groups and what we try to accomplish with very little resources. And I appreciate your comments today and throughout your career. Thank you for all you've done. Okay, so that is this particular presentation. And Doug, you're welcome to come city council meeting after city council meeting, and you can be right there. He'll be busy. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next item. I don't know if those of you who were here mainly for the presentation, if you'd like to exit, you can use a minute to do so. Thank you. Okay, that was a very moving presentation for us all. We do, however, have to move through our agenda. Number 5, under reports and presentations, we have a presentation on the state emergency regulations to increase urban water conservation. Take action as necessary and appropriate. Mr. Palazzo.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to introduce Mr. Weir from our Public Works Department. He has a brief presentation. The state adopted some regulations early last week, and we thought we'd take this opportunity to, put this on the council agenda just to try and get some education out to the public and to the council on what the regulations are. So, introduce Eric.
Thank you. Mr. Weir.
All right, so on Tuesday, July 15th, the State Water Resources Control Board adopted a resolution that mandates water conservation throughout the state of California. State of California, the entire state, is now considered under drought. Certain areas are classified as more extreme or extreme. Our area, though, is considered in a severe drought. This past year, we've had a lot less rainfall than what we currently have. Smith River's at low levels already, and it's only July. So this is a statewide measure. You hear the term water conservation, and everybody kind of gets up in arms, like, oh my goodness, I can't do anything now. I need to conserve water to an extreme level. Well, really, this isn't that level. This is more just a best management practice level of water conservation. These are things, in my opinion, that really people should be doing anyway. $270 days, so it actually goes into next year as well. And I think the thought on that is that they want to see what exactly this winter brings, because they don't know. There's rumors of an El Nino. They don't know exactly if that's going to come true or not. So if we have another dry winter, then they might extend these regulations, or they might even get to a different level of conservation. So what it means for Crescent City water customers. So these actions will be prohibited. And so you cannot irrigate your lawn or plants between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So that's basically don't irrigate during the day. Thought behind that is if you irrigate during the day, it's more effective to irrigate at night, and that's due to the fact that the water doesn't evaporate as much as it does during the day. Now, granted, for our climate, this isn't as important as, say, other communities where it's a lot hotter during the day, but nonetheless, it's a best management practice. You're prohibited from allowing irrigation to run off your lawn. So don't water to the excess that is now running off your lawn onto the sidewalks, down into the curb and gutters. You can't wash sidewalks, walkways, driveways, or other hard surfaces. You can wash your car, but you have to do it with a hose that's fitted with a shutoff nozzle. And then you can't fill or refill your swimming pools, spas, or hot tubs. What a water customer within our district must ensure, you must ensure that all your hoses are equipped with shutoff nozzles, that any fountain or ornamental water type feature has a recirculating water recycling system in it. So it's not just fresh potable water that's just goes through the fountain and then is wasted. It has to just recycle via a pump or other sort of system. You have to promptly repair all leaks in plumbing fixtures, water lines, or sprinkler systems. For restaurants, what they need to do is they need to provide a notice on each table that we're in this state of water emergency, and they are to refrain from just automatically serving everyone with a glass of water. If you want water, you just simply have to ask for it. You've seen this in Southern California for many years. This is part of the regulations now. Hotels and motels must provide in each room a notice of water emergency. And then for us, we're responsible for enforcing these regulations. We also have increased reporting requirements that will be placed on us, where we have to report the production of water and per gallons per capita per day, so they can actually monitor what the conservation efforts are actually providing as far as measurable numbers. And then also, we're going to try to educate and inform our customers and employees. We're going to do this by putting this information on the city's website. We're going to go ahead and put notices on everyone's water bill that the regulations are in place, and to go to the city's website to find out exactly what they need to do. And then we'll educate our employees too, so everyone's aware. So if the members of the public have questions, they can come to us and get some answers. The regulations for the city and these nuances and things that everyone must ensure happens. This is specific to the city of Crescent City. This is because we're an urban water supplier that has a water shortage contingency plan. If you don't, then there's other regulations. Say if you're in another district, there's other regulations that might apply. So if you hear the fact that you're only allowed to irrigate for 2 days a week, that might apply to other organizations or water suppliers that don't have a water shortage contingency plan. So for the city of Crescent City, our irrigation restriction is simply you can't irrigate during the day between the hours of 10 a.m. in the morning and 6 p.m. at night.
Eric, is this for all of our water users or is it just for city residents?
The stipulations that I went over in this presentation is just for city residents. Well, it's for all of the city customers. City residents and if you live in the county. Anyone that receives water from the city of Crescent City.
All water users.
Yes.
So Eric, if a commercial car wash does not have, can you go back? Mine doesn't work, by the way. If they don't, if they're not already equipped with a water recycling system, what, they have to close their doors?
You know, we'll need to take that on a case-by-case basis. I know the new car wash that's at Chevron's, they do have a recycling system, so
Okay.
so they are already equipped. A lot of the other ones are are actual just a hand wands. That's a hose with a shutoff on it. So they'll fall under that regulation.
I'm sorry. Is the state going to pay for all this educational material that we're going to be putting out in all the motels and everything throughout our water using service area?
Although I happen to believe that's a good idea, I don't think that was part of their resolution, and so I don't believe so.
So it's mandated cost that isn't going to get reimbursed, it sounds like.
Correct.
Who will have responsibility for enforcing these measures?
You know, it's going to be on the city to enforce it. So it's going to be the enforcement level that's within our current staffing levels. We'll definitely do the best that we can to enforce it, as there's penalties on us if we don't enforce or we don't comply with this. So they've stated that there's a $500 a day penalty, or you could ask the courts to impose a $500 a day penalty for people that violate. The city, however, they've stated in their regulations that we could be facing fines of $10,000 a day if these regulations aren't complied with.
Is there a graduated enforcement of this, first a notice to get it fixed, and then if it doesn't get fixed, go into it?
Martha, do you want to answer that?
As far as the city's enforcement of individuals and, homeowners and stuff, I think the regulation makes it clear that there's quite a bit of discretion given to local agencies as to how they want to conduct this program. But it is important that we do have a program. There are 3 mandatory things that the city has to do, and there's a long list of about 20 things that they suggest we do. And then enforcement of the prohibited activities is sort of left up to the city's discretion as to exactly how we want to do that. Obviously, resources is a big part of it. And I think this is all about education and changing people's day-to-day practices of how they use water, just so that it's not being wasted. This is aimed at reducing waste, not necessarily use. So.
Yeah, and a lot of these stipulations are just, best management practices. When you wash your car, you shouldn't just have an open hose where the water runs when you're not actually rinsing the car off. So that's why they want the shut-off nozzle. Irrigation, it's better to do it at night versus during the day, so you don't have the loss just due to evaporation. So a lot of these things are simply best management practices versus being real restrictive, especially since the city does have this water shortage contingency plan. Other organizations will be asked to limit irrigation only 2 days a week.
How long do we have to fill our hot tubs? When's it start? August
Right
1st?
around August 1st.
I would only hope that we watch the drought carefully, and if it continues to get worse, there'll be more severe regulations, and at some point, we need to talk to our legislators and let them know we have a little different situation here. I mean, if we don't use the water, doesn't the water just flow out into the ocean from the Smith River?
You know,
I mean, it is different than the rest of the state, and that needs to be pointed out.
yes, and, you know, we're in a different scenario, you know, a lot of the other agencies, water purveyors throughout the state, they're having, you know, a lot of troubles with their wells and their wells going dry, and, you know, we're only in July, so the peak of this probably won't hit us until October, early November. But we are monitoring the Smith River. We feel we're in a lot better situation than a lot of other agencies throughout the state, but it's something we will monitor.
Thank you. Other council comments or questions? Okay, I'll open it up for public comment. I know this is a presentation, but some of you may have a comment on this matter. Public comment? Yes? Please state your name, city or county residency, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, hi, Linda Sutter, County. Listen, I don't know how much water is going to be allotted to the city before incurring that $10,000 a day fine, but we have kind of a little gorilla on our back, and that gorilla is called Pelican Bay State Prison, because that water is pretty much run 24/7 a day, and I don't know if that's already included in the allotment of the water that we get every day. But I was told earlier this year a water line had broken where 37,000 gallons of water was lost, and there was a threat of the city turning their water off at that point. So my concern would be for the city, I don't know what the answer is, you know, we can't afford a $10,000 a day fine. And what is Pelican Bay going to do to monitor their water situation? Because they do use a lot of water during the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Clark Ducart, and I'm currently the acting warden at Pelican Bay. And so, I didn't come here to address this, but I think I can bring some clarity to it.
Okay.
Currently,
Welcome.
we're operating under a governor's executive order, which mandates that we conserve water much more restrictive than what's been proposed by the city. We have shower meters. The inmates are allowed 5-minute showers. We can't wash any vehicles. We can't irrigate anything. We can't hose any hard surfaces off. And we've been under that for many, many months, and we are fully in compliance with the directive in the executive order. As Ms. Sutter spoke to the water leak, it wasn't a water line per se. It was our hydronic hot water loop, which is a major capital outlay project we've been undertaking for about 4 years. And the problem is it's so deteriorated, it's spraying leaks, but we immediately repair those things. And as of last Friday, we've abandoned the underground water loop and are now operating on our new above-ground loop, so, and using zero makeup water.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. Appreciate it. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and bring it back. Is there anything more to, this is a presentation for information purposes only, as I understand? Okay, so no actions necessary. We'll go ahead and move on to communications. This is our public comment period. Any member of the audience is invited to address the City Council on any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the City of Crescent City. Comments of public interest or on matters appearing on the agenda are accepted. Note, however, that the council is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. Any comments that are not at the microphone are out of order and will not be a part of the public record. After receiving recognition from myself, please state your name and city or county residency for the record. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. And I might say if your public comment is associated with one of the business items coming up, you may want to wait to make that public comment so that you can hear the information prior to doing so. But this is the general public comment period. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none then, we'll go ahead and move on. We are going to adjourn this regular meeting of the City of Crescent City, and we're going to take up the Crescent City Housing Authority. I'll call the Housing Authority meeting to order, and as far as a roll call, the same members are here that were here at the beginning of the City Council meeting, so I don't think we need to do that. Again, communications, public comment period. As before, any member of the audience is invited to address the Housing Authority on any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the Crescent City Housing Authority. Comments of public interest or on matters not otherwise appearing on the agenda are accepted. Note, however, that the authority is not able to undertake extended discussion or to act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please state your name for the record. Any comments that are not at the microphone will not be a part of the public record. So is there any public comment related to the Crescent City Housing Authority? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of approval of the regular meeting minutes of July 7th and approval of the warrant claims list for June 16th through July 21st.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval.
Okay,
Second.
it's been moved and seconded. Prior to voting on this, is there any public comment on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, would you please poll the vote?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Shalong?
Yes.
Councilmember Ania?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Holly. I'll get it right on the
Yes,
last one.
thank you. Yeah, that's the important one anyway. Okay, Housing Director's Report, we have none. So public hearing, there's none. Continuing business, none. New business, none. So we will adjourn the Housing Authority meeting, and the next regular meeting will be scheduled for August 18th, 2014. So we're going to adjourn the Housing Authority meeting and reconvene as the Crescent City successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Again, I'll call that meeting to order. And again, the roll is the same as before, so I will not go through that liturgy. Public comment period. I'm going to read this quickly because I think that's what's required. Any member of the audience is invited to address the redevelopment agency on any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the City of Crescent City or the Crescent City Redevelopment Agency. Comments of public interest or on matters not otherwise appearing on the agenda are accepted. Note, however, that the agency is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on non-agendized items. Such items can be referred to staff for appropriate action, which may include placement on a future agenda. After receiving recognition from myself, please state your name for the record, and the public comment period is 3 minutes. Any public comment on the Crescent City successor agency to the redevelopment agency? Okay, seeing none, we'll come back to the consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of approval of the regular meeting minutes from June 21, 2014, and approval of the warrant claims from April 22, 2014 to August 18, 2014.
Move to approve.
Okay, it's been moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar of the Crescent City, I just like saying this, the Crescent City successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Is there any public comment on this matter, on the consent calendar? Okay, anything else from the council? Okay, would you please poll the vote?
Yes, sir. Board Member Shalong?
Yes.
Board Member Ania?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gastineau?
Yes.
And Chairman Holly.
Yes, thank you. Again, there's no executive director's report, no business items, no public hearing, no new business. A place for us to have discussions regarding this? Any comments on redevelopment? Okay. So we'll adjourn this meeting until its regular scheduled meeting of August 18th, 2014. So we're adjourning this meeting and we're moving back to the City of Crescent City, the City Council meeting. We have no public hearings, we have no continuing business. Under new business, we're going to consider and authorize city manager to work with the Elk Valley Rancheria, a federally recognized Indian tribe, to sign all letters and documents necessary for the HUD Indian Community Development Block Grant application for funding for fire hall rehabilitation and the purchase of a Type 1 fire apparatus. Take action as necessary and appropriate. Mr. Palazzo.
Mayor Holly, members of the council, good evening. Gene Palazzo, city manager. And I was approached about 2 weeks ago by the Elk Valley Rancheria on an application process that they have available to them through the Indian Community Development Block Grant Program. And Kevin is here from the Elk Valley Rancheria, may want to say a few words this evening. But they went through a process, and they're trying to figure out some projects and potential projects that they possibly could apply for with the CDBG funding. And their CDBG funding is similar to our process that we go through with CDBG, however they report directly to HUD, the federal government. And it's through, it's focused basically on the Indian Community Development Block, or Indian tribes. So, they stated that they had, possibly one minor project, but they thought that they could partner with the city of Crescent City to see if we had any projects that, we had that may be, beneficial to both, the Indian tribe and the city. And we went through, discussed, quite a bit of projects. We, as you know, we have quite a list of projects and programs that, we try and move forward with. And what we came up with that meets the targeted income group and their requirements, and easily to put together, because this application is due on July 29th, I believe. So it's a very quick process to make this happen, is to do the additional improvements that are necessary for our city fire station. And the fire station services not only the city, but the surrounding area through our agreements with the district, but it's typically the first response station to the Elk Valley Rancheria area and the Birch track. So we thought it would meet those specific criteria. And going back and kind of a recap, we applied for a FEMA grant for a seismic retrofit of the fire station. And all that grant addresses is the structural integrity of the building and making it structurally sound to meet that earthquake criteria. This grant would address the other, I guess, I don't want to say amenities, but there's kind of benefits to the station that we haven't addressed, which would include the handicapped accessibility, the upgrade of the turnout room to where we would have, I guess showers, or actually a shower downstairs, kind of enlarge that bathroom downstairs, kitchen area improvements, training room improvements, add in the technology components that we need to add in. And then also with that, add a fire apparatus, type 1 fire apparatus. The entire grant is about $600,000. We're working diligently to put this grant application together. There's admin fees involved, but as we work through the process, I'd like to give council authority to work with Elk Valley Rancheria to apply for this application and authorize city manager to sign any documents necessary to move forward. Really great partnership, and we very much appreciate reaching out from the Elk Valley Rancheria on this application process.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? And Kevin, would you like to say anything?
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Plotz.
Hi, Kevin Milieu, Elk Valley Rancheria, the county. I'd like to say that after looking at the numbers, it suggested that we have a 25% chance to actually get this, but I think that working together, we can actually demonstrate the need for this and probably bring it up to 50 is what I'm thinking. And it's been a pleasure working thus far, and look forward to working with you guys more.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your bringing this to our attention and being willing to work with us. I know that fire department is the closest to your rancheria. I have a quick, easy question. A type 1 apparatus? I have to ask that. Is it a hose?
Chief Wakefield, please.
I don't know what it is.
That was pretty simple.
Yeah.
Is it a hose?
Type 1 fire apparatus is the largest of the normal structure engines.
Oh.
And the Type 1 comes from the state. They categorize everything, And
Okay.
so it's actually, it's real similar to the engines that we have right now. They're all
So we'll have a
Type
new
1s
fire
as
engine.
well. A new fire engine.
Okay,
It's a great deal.
that's great.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful, and thanks to the tribe and everybody that's been working on it. There's been a lot of effort put into it in the last 2 weeks, but hopefully it comes through.
Wow, this is very exciting.
Yeah.
Any questions from the council of any of the gentlemen that have talked just now?
Oh, hey, Chief, when we heard about this first, we talk about the prison, they have their fire department out there and they train with you. And my question is that, does the tribe have anybody, like first responders out there? And Gene said they can volunteer, but that might be a great cross-training program to have some first responders out there in the tribe with us.
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to applications, always process them, so if you know of anybody, we'd be glad to have them.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. So, there's no other comments or questions here?
I was just going to comment that in any time that you can have a city government and a tribal entity partner together to benefit the community as a whole is usually a win-win situation. And I find that in many partnerships that we've participated in the past, they've been much more successful. So I think I have high hopes for that.
Thank you. So if there's no other comments from the council at this point, I would take public comment on this. Is there any public comment on the proposal that we participate in a HUD Indian Community Development Block Grant application? Okay, seeing no public comments, we'll bring it back to the council.
I would move to authorize the city manager to work with Elk Valley Rancheria to sign all letters and documents necessary for the HUD Indian Community Development Block Grant application for funding for the fire hall rehabilitation and the purchase of a Type 1 fire apparatus fire engine truck.
Okay,
Second.
thank you.
For the hose.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to do so. Any other discussion? Okay, would you please poll the vote?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Ania?
Yes.
Councilmember Shalon?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau?
Yes.
And Mayor Holly.
Yes. Again, thank you for being here and thank you for your participation. Okay, number 9, we're going to receive a wastewater system financial plan update. Consider and authorize city manager to submit state loan modification request and consider authorization of principal-only loan payment by August 1, 2014. Otherwise, take action as necessary and appropriate. Mr. Palazzo.
Yeah, Mayor Holly, members of the council, good evening. Tonight we have a bit of a presentation for you. The presentation is probably going to take about 20 minutes, possibly a little longer because my timing is usually a little off. But kind of backing up a couple years ago and going through the budget process, the city council is well aware of our budget deficits that were in the sewer and water funds, and trying to right side the budgets to address the needs of the community and the operating and maintenance of our systems. We addressed the water system first, and we went through a process that we presented to the council. In the end result, we adjusted the rates to get us on track to address the operating and maintenance needs, and then action and some future capital improvement needs. And I think we're on a very good track of addressing that. And you saw that in the budget this year. In this year's budget, we told the council that we would be back, and we adopted a deficit budget of about $600,000, I believe, in this year's budget. Emily can correct me on my numbers. Previous year, we adopted a deficit budget as well. Our direction, from the council is to come back. And how are we going to move forward and to address this deficit? City staff hired a team, and we have a really good team. The team is here this evening. It includes Emily Boyd, our finance director, Eric Weir, our public works director, Tom Romsberg, our utilities managers. Tom is here as well. We hired Susan Mayer, and you're familiar with Susan. It was an interim finance director for us. We kept her on board to help us through this process. And also Wildan. We have Jonathan Barnes here this evening, and they're all going to take a little bit of role in presenting to you this evening. So the story that we're going to tell tonight is addressing the financial plan. How are we going to move forward with addressing the needs of our sewer system, operation, maintenance, and capital improvements. And how are we going to address the annual operating deficits? We're going to talk about the state discussions that we've had with the state, and we've been pretty clear that we've been trying to negotiate with the state to lower our interest payments on our $40 million loan. The interest payments, our loan payments are about $2.2 million. 1.1 of that is interest. We've had some very good positive feedback from the state on taking that down to 0 interest. We haven't approved anything, but we've had some very positive feedback. We've had some positive feedback about graduating payments, reducing our payments and kind of graduating them over the next 27 years. And in doing so, though, we're also going to ask tonight that we make our principal payment, but not our interest payment to the state that's due in August. And, this is a very important point I want to make to the council, because this it puts us in technical default on our loan. Now, Susan will address that a little bit more in her presentation, but that's something that we need to, have a discussion on and be aware of. And in a sense, with all this, we're going to be asking the state for an $18 million rate relief to our customers. Over time period with that interest rates, it's about $18 million. So we need to devise a plan going forward, and the state has requested, what's it going to look like in the next 27 years? And we've struggled with that, because we can take a look at the next 5 years and probably be pretty accurate. It's going out beyond 5 years, 7, 10, 15, 20 years, that's very difficult to crystal ball. We just don't know what the environmental regulations are going to be like, what the requirements are going to be. So we've done a lot of work, hired a consultant firm to go through and put together a capital improvement program for 30 years. States required that. We've taken a look at what will it actually take us to operate, what's the replacement value of the equipment, when does it need to be replaced, and what's the cost of that. It's kind of, just like a house. We're always going to be doing repairs and upgrades, to this plant. And we're going to talk about tonight about addressing phase 2 and phase 3 and how we're pushing that out. And Eric will talk about that a little bit. So in order to keep things moving here, first Eric Weir will come up, give an overview of the wastewater treatment plant, kind of the history, just kind of a refresher. A lot of this you've heard, but we want to get in the document, communicate, inform the public on that. And then Susan Mayer will come up, talk about the financial condition, the state loan, and what's the workout plan. She's going to address that with the council. Then Jonathan Barnes will be here and come up and present the complete financial picture, the financial modeling, and illustrate how that works with the rates. So let me have Mr. Weir behind me, ready to go. And please ask questions as we go through this. If you have questions as we travel along, we'll be here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gene. And let me grab the mouse. Okay, so as Gene stated, the first part of this presentation is to kind of go over the Crescent City wastewater system as an overview to explain kind of what we have currently, and then we'll go back and we'll take a look at where we were, where we are, and then where we want to be. So currently, we provide sewer service to approximately 3,700 accounts. We provide this service not only in the city limits, but also in the surrounding areas. You'll hear the term, if you're familiar with the surrounding areas, at least with the sewer system. It's referred to as the county service area, or the CSA. The city owns and operates the regional wastewater treatment plant because it does include not only the city, but also the surrounding areas. The collection system includes 51 miles of collection mains throughout the city streets and incorporated county areas. And then recent activity at the treatment plant has all been grant funded. We were fortunate, we received a federal CDBG grant in which we've completed the replacement of the 2nd Street sewer main between F Street and B Street. We replaced a failing 18-inch clay line with a new 24-inch PVC line. We received the Proposition 50 grant funding for a new headworks project that we included a dual spiral screen system to help the efficiencies of the plant. And we also received 2 EMPG grants to increase the security system at the plant. So we've been in front of this council with the opportunity to complete these projects. But it's not because we had the rate structure to really afford to do these projects. We were very fortunate we received the grants and we were able to complete these vital capital improvements. Like I said, to fully understand where we are today and where we need to be, you really have to understand where we were, and especially from my standpoint, how far we've come, because we've come a long way. In 1958, the original treatment plant was constructed. This was comprised of just three components. You have the headworks, you had what they called a Clare adjuster, which is, in layman's terms, just a solid separator, and then you have an outfall, which is the final discharge line that discharges it to the ocean. Before this, the collection system simply was comprised of, collection pipes that ran down to 2nd Street, and then that line just extended out into the ocean, where it went out about 700-800 feet and discharged directly into the ocean with no treatment. In the 1950s, that's when the Clean Water Act came about, and that's what required the installation of treatment plants nationwide. So that's when the city first put in this system. In 1973, this act was further refined, and the restrictions were further introduced, in which the city had to upgrade its treatment. So the first round in the 1970s is when we installed the primary clarifiers. We converted our existing Clare adjuster to a digester, and then also added the disinfection and solids handling facilities. Second phase in the 1970s was the second major upgrade, in which we added the secondary treatment, as they call it, or biological treatment of the waste to further clean the water. The 70s was a time period where there was a lot of grants, and the state and the federal government wanted you to produce cleaner water so the environment can be less affected by the wastewater, and so they gave cities grants to complete all this. So this wasn't rate funded, this was grant funded. The next major project that the city took on in regard to the treatment plant was in 2005. So notice the dates between 1979 and 2005, 26 years. The regulations didn't stay the same within those 26 years. It's just the city didn't complete any major projects at the treatment plant. There were some smaller ones, but nothing major. And we also did some collection system work. So in 2005, we completed the outfall, and then in 2007 was the wastewater treatment plant improvement project. That included a new administration building, larger influent pumps, SCADA controls, new laboratory, MBR, so on and so forth that we'll get into. So here's some pictures of some of the projects that were completed. You see this is the original headworks. If you were to go to the treatment plant today, this headworks is still in use. New pumps, but same headworks. The Clare adjuster that was converted to a digester. Again, this digester is still in use. You had the original outfall. We've added an additional outfall, but this outfall is again still in use. This is just a shot of where exactly the outfall terminates, which is similar or right adjacent to where the lighthouse is, and they both connect right there. There's a shot of the treatment plant in 1970. Looked pretty good. A few years went by. This is a shot of them when they're actually converting the Clare adjuster in 1972. Primary clarifiers, again, these primary clarifiers are still in use. So when you think about the treatment plant project that occurred in 2007, it wasn't a rebuild of the entire plant. It was just adding additional systems to it and rebuilding some of the key components. But a lot of the plant is still original as it was when it was first put in. So what happened in those 26 years? Well, in 1997, the state looked upon Crescent City and wasn't real happy with us, and finally issued the cease and desist order. This basically mandated that we didn't have any more connections. They updated that cease and desist over the years and added smaller connections, a small number of connections, but it was still, there was a finite number because we weren't in compliance. The city was getting fined frequently in these years. So in 2003, to address the cease and desist order, the city completed a facilities plan. This facilities plan identified 3 stages. Stage 1, which was really to address the water quality component. You had stage 2, which was solids processing. Then you had stage 3, which would address future capacity. The 2007 project, the outfall project, really only addressed stage 1. That was an immediate need. This is something we had to do to address water quality issues, and that's what that project was comprised of. So here's some shots of the 2005 outfall construction. This was kind of the first component of the project that went slightly before the big project that we're all aware of. This was a directional drilling project in which we installed a 24-inch HDPE outfall and connected it into the existing outfall out at the Lighthouse Island. This is a major project, and this project will last the city for years to come. We think that this outfall that we now have, with the addition of pumps eventually once we need it, could last us for the next 30 to 40 years. So this is a long-term project that the city will be very happy with for years to come. Stage 1 improvement project. So this is the treatment plant improvement project that we're all aware of. It was roughly a $37 million construction cost project. The loan that the city took out to complete this project is $44 million. So you're probably asking yourself, well, $37 million compared to 44, why? Well, there's a lot of design costs that go into it, and then there's construction management costs. This was a long design between the facilities plan in 2003 to actually breaking ground on this project in 2006 to the 3-year, 4-year construction schedule that needed to be managed. So here's some shots of this project. Not an easy project is really the intent of these slides. This is a very complex system. It's not just simply putting in a septic tank in the backyard. This is a very complex treatment plant. You can see that this is a 20-foot deep excavation right near the ocean. So you're near sea level and actually below the groundwater level. You see all the conduits and whatnot that go to all the controls and the power of all the equipment that's within there. This is the anoxic tank diffusers, which go into the MBR process. Here's the MBR aeration basin. MBR stands for a membrane biological reactor. It's a very advanced treatment system that allows us to use this system as well as our existing RBC system. Here's the membranes. This is just one of 32 racks of membranes. Here's the MBR, the filter pumps down underneath the MBR. Here's the compressors and blowers. Here's a shot of the new chemical storage room. This is a shot of the turbidity meter showing that the turbidity coming out of the MBR is actually 0.04. Turbidity is a measure of how clean the water is, just from a visual standpoint, how dirty it is, I guess, is to look at it from the opposite point of view. 0.04 is what's coming out of the MBR. What comes out of your tap is about 0.2. So the MBR water is actually cleaner from a visual standpoint than actually what comes out of the tap. So the quality of effluent is remarkable. Here's the headworks. I said the headworks was the original. Well, we changed the pumps out in this project, but the walls are the same. There's a shot of the reconstructed wastewater treatment plant grounds. There's a shot of just the conduit bay that run throughout the middle of this project. It's just, it's a maze of conduits now. Here's a shot of the electrical panels and MCCs. There's the new operations building. So pre and post. Before, when we were getting fined, the treatment plant has what they call a 30-30 permit, that our limit on BOD and suspended solids is 30. Before, we were always pushing the limit. So here you show that the BOD effluent was actually exceeded in 2009. In 2011, we're down to 12, well within our permit. Same with suspended solids. We took it from 16 down to 6. With the completion of this project, the cease and desist order was rescinded. So here's a shot of just the overall treatment plant as it stands now with all the new components, with the MBR, utilizing the new components, which you see over here, with the old components that are still in use today. So, back to the facilities plan, because this plan just didn't identify stage 1, it also identified stage 2 and stage 3. So stage 1, you see it in green, is now complete. Stage 2 and 3, they're still out there. So this, with all treatment plants, time just doesn't stop. Regulations get harder, treatment plants get older, there's still components of it that need to be addressed. So stage 2 and stage 3 still need to be addressed. So with that, it's just the fact that this is a living project, and we are not done with this project. We're going to do everything in our power to evaluate what the next step is, but there's always going to be a next step. We need to prepare for that. We can't just let 26 years go by and get under a cease and desist order. We have to, 1, maintain what we have, and then 2, we need to plan for the future. And with that, I'll introduce Susan Mayer to talk about the financial condition.
Thank you, Mr. Weir.
Good evening, Mayor and
Welcome
City
back.
Council. Thank you. I'm here to speak about the financial condition of the system, its depleted condition, some difficult choices in front of the City Council in terms of the loan payment that is due August 1st, and also to discuss a path forward that will allow the City Council to balance competing needs. You have a lot of stakeholders with this system, including not only the customers who support the system with their revenues, but your operating crews who are trying to operate the plant, your engineering crew who are trying to maintain the plant and improve the plant, the state as a lender who's looking for repayment on his loan, and also the environmental interests who are creating the regulations that the city has to function within. So you have a lot of stakeholders. So how do we balance those competing needs with the path going forward? After watching Eric's pictures, my real takeaway is that this is an extraordinarily complex system. You're operating, you are the business owners of a very complex operating system that's probably one of the most complex of the city programs. This is a system with $50 million of assets, over $50 million of assets. And I got to, if I can make this. $50 million of assets that are financed with a $44 million loan. I have to tell you, when I arrived at the city last summer and started looking at your financial statements, this is one of the most surprising numbers that I saw on your balance sheet. A $44 million loan for a city this size is really almost a shocking level. It's quite a burden and quite a challenge for a community of this size to attempt to repay a $44 million loan. You would typically see this size of a loan with a much larger population base to support it. But through Eric's slides, we've seen the regulatory requirements that created the situation which necessitated the size of loan. The enterprise fund is operated separately from other programs of the city. It has its own fund that collects the revenues, pays the debt, holds the assets. And I want to make that clear because any surplus from the system or operating deficits are retained within the fund. The wastewater revenues are not supplementing or supporting any other city programs. They're operated separately from the general fund. The bottom line is that the revenues of the system have not been covering the costs, and they have not been since the loan repayments began 3 years ago. The reserves are depleted, your working capital is overdrawn, your budget is a deficit, and there's not sufficient money to make the debt payment that's due August 1st. So let's talk about this loan. What is it? How did we get here? The loan was actually initially applied for at the $19 million level, which is a level a whole lot more appropriate for this size of community. But through the regulatory process and through the construction contracting process, the ultimate project cost far more, and the ultimate agreement between the state and the city was $44 million. And so there was a significant jump. And that, I think, is why we're here today, because the jump from that loan from 19 to 44 is what really has tipped the system over the edge in terms of its financial viability. The loan carries a 2.4% interest. And as an economically depressed community, disadvantaged community, you meet the criteria for the state for qualifying for extended terms. And so this loan, normally the state's loan program requires a 20-year payback period. This community qualified for an extended 30-year payment period. But even with that 30 years, it is still a challenge. The state operates, this is a state board. It is the State Water Resources Board. They have a revolving loan fund, and they extend these loans to various cities across the state to help them with their environmental compliance. To date, 3 payments have been made, and there are 27 more, and they cost $2.1 million per year. That payment is due in 10 days. Let's talk about the financial condition of the system. And your finance director, Emily Boyd, briefed you on this during the budget process. And the numbers I'm presenting were consistent with the numbers that you saw in your budget workshop in June. The system operates with working capital. And what is working capital? It is basically near-term cash flow. It includes the cash, but also the balances due from your customers and the balances due to your vendors. The budget is designed to spend the entire year collecting the resources so that by June 30 you have the money to make your August 1st payment. And so at June 30, and although the books aren't closed yet, the best estimate of that number is $1.9 million. Unfortunately, you need 2.1 to make the payment. Principal payment of 1.1 and another $1 million of interest. Should both of those payments be made, you would be overdrawn by $200,000 in your account. So let's talk about the budget. Why can't we just cut the expenses? If we're overdrawn, let's just cut back a little and see if we can ride this through. And the pie chart I have here helps explain why that would be a very difficult choice. The red bar here is your debt. It's consuming 42% of your budget, which is just a huge percent. The orange is the capital. The city hired an engineering firm to prepare a 30-year CIP plan for you so you can plan for the future and right-size your budget. They have recommended far greater investment. This small pie of 2% is only $97,000 in your next year's budget. It's hard to imagine trying to maintain a $50 million asset with a capital budget of $97,000. So at this point, the city has cut the capital as much as it can, and probably to the detriment of the system. The blue box is the operating and maintenance budget. And in order to close the gap, as you can see here, the revenues of the system are $4.6 million. The expenditures are $5.1. So you have a $500,000 deficit. If If you were to try to cut that $500,000 out of your operating budget, it would require you to cut almost a sixth of the operating and maintenance expenses. So what are those expenses? It's not just the staff who operate the plant. It's also the operating expenses, including the utilities, the electricity to run the plant, very expensive sludge removal, the disposal costs of the sludge, and other operating contracts and maintenance costs, parts, supplies. We believe this is already a bare bones budget. In fact, two independent third parties have commented on this ratio. The Kennedy Jenks engineering firm benchmarked and said and has advised the city that their operating costs are lower than the norm. Not only the operating costs, but also the maintenance costs. They're recommending a benchmark of 1% of the asset value be reinvested each year in maintenance. The city's budget is not able to accommodate that. Separately, the state has hired a consultant to work with the city and advise it on its financial plan, and that consultant has benchmarked a different ratio of expenditures, but also has concluded that the city's budget is underserved in its operating and maintenance cost. So our conclusion is that there's just not $500,000 to pull out of the remaining budget. It is already a bare bones budget. And with that, we have an operating deficit. And so at this point, the loan is facing default. You do not have the cash to make your August 2014 payment. And if you did, you would put the rest of the budget at risk for the year. This is not new news. The system has been operating at a deficit for several years. The last 3 years have all had a deficit operating budget. This is, the difference this year is that now you've hit a wall because the cash is gone. The cash is actually a little weaker in 13-14 than had been anticipated, and so when the original budget was adopted, they hadn't anticipated that you would actually be overdrafted at this point in time. However, the revenues didn't quite come in as planned, and so when you operate a $50 million system without reserves, when you have minor fluctuations in your operating budget, there's no room to go, and so that's why at this point you're facing a default. When I say default, it's a technical default because you have the money to pay your principal, but not the interest. And how does that impact the city? It'll impair your credit rating, and it will prevent you from seeking favorable financing for other projects that may come along for other city business and programs. And most importantly, it will impair your water enterprise financing program and its capital improvement program. And so certainly this isn't the first city or the first borrower to have challenges in repaying debt. And what the industry calls the situation is the need for a workout plan. And so that's what we've done. We've put together a workout plan that gives you a path forward to balance your competing needs and to try to get back in compliance within a few months. And what we have, the action then before the City Council tonight is to consider the financial plan, but most specifically, just the element for the loan proposal. We have a proposal to the state to modify the loan terms. And we hope, with the timing of today's action, we hope that the state board will be able to position this for their October board agenda. And with that, the city could get back into compliance by October. And so the default that we're talking about, we hope, is a short-term situation. Let's talk about our outreach to the state board. We have spent the last year setting the stage for success in this renegotiation. The city has initiated both formal and informal conversations over the last year. And as a result, I can say that we believe the state is very well educated on the city's condition and what it can afford. I would say that there's been a great deal of cooperation and communication with their staff. We have discussed and debated several scenarios, several alternatives, and taken their feedback. As I indicated before, the state hired a consultant to work with us, and they've done a detailed review of our financial operations, our financial statements, our budget, and given feedback as well. And so by incorporating the feedback from the state personnel and from their consultant as well, we believe that we have set the stage and that the proposal we have before you will meet their criteria and that you have a good chance of success in renegotiating these terms. What is the workout plan here? How do we move forward? What are our objectives? I think the first objective that we recommend to you as a city council is that you do what you can to avoid the future risk of default. You want a long-term plan. You don't want a short-term solution, but you want to be sure that you're setting the stage for a long-term success so that once you recommit to a new loan term, that you're able to follow through and meet those commitments. And by doing that, I think we believe that you need to reduce the debt burden, that 40% of your budget into debt is too high of a threshold. We're recommending that you build a 3-month operating reserve, a 90-day of cash flow, to allow you to weather the storm when unexpected things happen and you have positive or negative operating results. We recommend a 5% capital reserve. And actually, this is a commitment that you made in the original loan. The original loan required you to set aside 5% and set aside and build to a 5% reserve. That amounts to $220,000 a year into a reserve. Compare that with the $97,000 of capital that was budgeted this year. We're recommending that you plan to self-fund whatever capital you can afford in the near term. Kennedy Jenks recommended a significant capital program that there's just simply not money in this workout plan, and so it requires some deferral of some projects, and we do want to note the risk of that. However, we believe you'll have limited access to new debt for some period of time until you can regain financial stability. So whatever capital needs to happen needs to come from your user rates in the near term. And now this is the tricky part. We do believe that you will need to slowly grow your revenue base to better fund the system. However, we're recommending that you do it slowly with single-digit rate increases to avoid shock to the customer and to allow the community to slowly grow their revenue base over time. And through these actions, we hope that you can restore financial stability so that you will be positioned to qualify for new debt when you are ready to embark on the next phase of your capital program. And Eric mentioned to you before stages 2 and 3, but there are other capital requirements of the system. Again, this is a living and breathing capital asset, $50 million. Things will break, things will happen, and you need to have a plan in place to minimize the risk of the system's operations. The specific, did I go too far? I'm sorry, I'm going to need help. Well, there we go. Thank you. All right. Here's the specific loan modification that we are recommending that the city submit to the state. Our specific recommendation is that you go ahead and make the principal payment of $1.1 million, and that you defer the $1 million interest payment pending the state's consideration of your proposal for 0% interest. We're hoping that the state forgives that interest. The interest term proposed is 0% retroactive to the date of the loan, and this is important because we're asking the state to take the $3 million of interest payments you have made over the last 3 years and apply it to principal. This is a significant ask, but it helps, it's part of the entire workout plan. The last component is a 4% graduated debt repayment schedule. This allows the payments to gradually ramp up and then cap at the $2.1 million payment that you currently are committed to. Now, the caveat here is that we can grow the principal payments, but it will require comparable annual growth in revenue to fund that. And so it tries to, again, balance the competing needs of your customers with your state as a lender to try and match the growth in the repayment between the debt and the revenue.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Speaking to that specific point, so if our customers are paying what we thought would be enough to pay the $2.1 million loan payment, and we're now going to back up and then ramp up to that $2.1 million over the remainder of the 30 years, why would we need our customers to make a significant change or rate increase when they're already here?
The budget is not currently balanced. The 14-15 budget with very little capital is out of balance by $500,000.
Right, but if our payment is lowered and it's not $2.1 million now, then couldn't we adjust that way?
I think that is the exact proposal. The proposal is to reduce the debt, augment the capital, and grow the revenues at the same rate as the debt is grown. And I will, our rate consultant, Wildan, is here with far better graphics and a better presentation on the revenue requirements. And so I think I may ask that you hear that presentation, and perhaps that will provide a better, more thorough answer to your question.
Maybe I can just add a little bit. That's a real good question. I think that's going to be answered when Mr. Barnes comes up, to do the rate. I think the two things that I got from, or received from the state and when, in our phone discussions is one, they'll entertain the 0% interest, and I think we got some real positive feedback, but they will not forgive the principal on the loan. And what you'll see in Mr.
Well,
Barnes-
they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, and,
Right.
But what you'll see in Mr. Barnes's charts is what we're trying to do is recover, and to meet the other objectives is to lower, the principal payment and then graduate those payments, over the next 27 years. They want it paid back within the time period of the loan. And I think what you'll see in his charts is, kind of that workout plan.
And perhaps to also respond to your question, the next slide shows the pie chart that will look like with the proposed workout plan. And this is, shows with a $4.4 million revenue target, how we can reduce the debt burden from 40 to 20%. And 20% debt burden is consistent with the recommendations and the comments we received from the state's financial consultant, that they thought was a more appropriate target than the 40. The capital budget increases here to 18% of the pie. The maintenance and operating budget dollars stay static, but the percentage of the pie stays the same, it grows. And so this is how the workout plan would allocate 4.4 million of user revenues. I think this is a real opportunity for the city, and this graph helps to describe what we're asking for. This is a graphic presentation of the debt ask. The black line at the top is the current debt payment of 2.1 million. And again, I want to reemphasize the budget isn't balanced with the 2.1 loan payment. The red bars show the proposed repayment, the 1.1 million payment now in August, and then graduated payments for growing 4% a year to a cap of 2.1. The savings on interest is 18.7 million. That's $18 million relief for the community. So I think this is an excellent opportunity for the city to save this money. I think that it competes, it attempts to balance competing needs between the ratepayer revenue, the operating requirements of the system, as well as getting the debt repaid. Risks. And so how can the city balance these competing risks? Because you've got, again, these competing interests. And so as we look at the overall financial plan that we're recommending, we think that the best chances for success are if you acknowledge the system requirements and acknowledge that we're operating a $50 million plant here with significant complexities, that we recommend that you create reserves to buffer from the unexpected, that you renegotiate with the state to reduce the debt burden, that you defer major portions of your capital program at risk, but defer them in the short term, but make plans to have that capital available in the future so that you can make the improvements that are that have been committed in your 2003 facilities plan, but also your other major maintenance projects as well. I think that investment of capital is important to reducing the overall operating risk of the system. We recommend that you generate revenue to meet the new debt schedule, and hopefully through this you will regain financial stability to qualify for the new financing. If the community can support the revenue increases that match the proposed debt increases, it's an incredible opportunity to save $18 million in interest. And that is, that describes our plan. I'd next like to turn this to your rate consultant, Jonathan Varnes, who will describe a little more the nuts and bolts of the rate and the revenue requirements.
Your rate consultant that did not know his watch made noise until just now, and he's had it for a year, so I apologize for that interruption. I'll let Eric get my, there we go, thank you. Okay. First off, Jonathan Varnes, Wildan Financial Services. I'm your rate consultant. It's a pleasure to be back in front of you all. Unfortunately, normally when I am in front of boards and councils, it's not always the greatest news in the world. That's sort of my job. But what I'd like to tell you is I think we've come up with a plan that we've all rolled up our sleeves on this one. We saw some really bad news, and I'm going to show you some of it. But I think the workout plan that we've come up with, I think we would all agree,
represents good faith on our part in coming up with something that's workable for the city and balances the risks of deferred capital and things of that nature with the impact on the customer. So with that, I'll get started in my presentation, and we'll get to the results fairly quickly. Just briefly, our agenda for this evening is just to talk about the purpose of the plan, to go through a brief approach to have you understand how we did this, talk about some of the data reviewed, the key assumptions, and then we'll get into results, and we'll be there very shortly with the results part of it, which I know we're all mostly interested in. So briefly, the purpose of any financial plan for a water or sewer utility, and for this specific wastewater utility, is to evaluate the sufficiency of your existing revenue stream. If we don't raise rates, can we make all of our payments, that debt payment we've been talking about, operations and maintenance, and can we maintain our reserves at minimum levels? That's the gist of any financial plan for any entity, especially for this wastewater utility. So the approach we took with this was very similar to the approach we took for the water rate study. In the first box, we looked at the planning. We gathered the data, analyzed it, reviewed it with your staff and management, and then conducted the analysis portion of it, where we looked at what-if scenarios and things like that. And we've spent most of our time looking at the what-ifs, because every time we looked at a what-if, it just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't workable. And we went back to the drawing board to try to come up with something that we felt would be workable for the city and the city's ratepayers. And then the communication portion, which is of course what we're talking about now, communicating what we've gone through, the results that we have for you all to consider, and what we're looking at in terms of a financial plan going forward. Briefly, some of the data we've reviewed: we've looked at your audited fiscal 2013 financial report, your historical revenues and expenses, your actual and budgeted revenues and expenses for 13, 14, and 15, your very detailed capital improvement plan, and your outstanding loan agreement with the state. So some of the key assumptions: there's really been no material growth in the customer base. That comes as no surprise to you all. We've factored that in, the fact that we don't expect any growth in the near term. And some assumptions with respect to your reserve levels. We want to maintain that 90-day reserve that Susan was discussing with you all. Attempt to meet that state loan requirement of putting $220,000 a year away for 10 years, which we do in the plan I'm going to put together for you. And make regular contributions to a depreciated capital reserve for capital funding, in recognition that, hey, we've got funding we've got to make for our capital in the future, and we need to make a regular contribution to a reserve, so we've got the money to make that funding. That's especially critical for you all at this point, since we're having this debt discussion where it may be difficult for you all to go to the debt market in the near term. You're going to need to self-fund your own capital. You can't just turn off the spigot, forgive the analogy, because at the end of the day, you've still got to make those investments in your capital program to make sure that everything runs as it's supposed to. And then finally, some inflationary cost escalation factors. We were assuming approximately 3% for your operating expenses over the forecast period, which is a 5-year forecast period for now. We did look 10 years and then even beyond that, but as your city manager told you earlier, by the time you get past 5 years, it's kind of hazy in the crystal ball there, so we're trying to limit it to 5 years for this presentation.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Isn't the state, didn't they put the ridiculous requirement on us to come up with a 30-year?
They did ask that we come up with a 30-year plan.
Did we negotiate that away, or?
Well, what we've done is we've looked at 30 years, just to see what's going on, to make sure there are not any large dragons in year 15 or so. The rate plan we're going to talk to you about this evening certainly doesn't get you through for the next 30 years, and to ask for that is a little difficult in our position, because it's kind of hard to commit to X% rate increases for the next 30 years. Couldn't do that. So they did do that. We took a very good effort at it, with the understanding that it's 30 years.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Certainly. So let's get to the results, which is what I know we're interested in doing. So in the results, what we did first was look at some scenarios. The first scenario, which was the status quo scenario, used your existing projections of operations and maintenance expenses, capital plan, and debt service. This basically said, in essence, if we don't raise rates at all, are we going to be okay for the next 5 years with the existing obligations we have for expenditures? And then it's not a news flash that didn't work out so well. So we came up with 3 alternatives for you to just have for informational purposes this evening, which gave us alternate projections of capital and capital funding, and also debt service, of course, which we've talked about some. So we're going to briefly go through those and get right to the meat of this.
So our fiscal year 15 expense breakdown under the status quo scenario looks similar, something like this. And the exact numbers aren't necessarily important for this presentation. I'm more interested in having you understand the overall message here. Our revenue requirement for fiscal 15 under the fully funded plan, the plan where we came up with a capital plan that really met all your needs. In other words, what we would like to do as a responsible utility management. It's about $8.1 million of a total revenue requirement. And you may have remembered from Susan's presentation that your operating revenues in the $4.5 million range. That's an incredible difference in cost to revenues. That means the delta there, that green triangle, you know, it's in the almost $4 million range, $3.5 million range. That's how much additional revenue you would need in fiscal 15 under this fully funded plan. And that doesn't just fall from the sky, that means rate increases. Obviously, we as a group looked at this and said, well, that is just, that's incredible to deal with for a community, for any community, for even my clients who are just you know, doing really well. That would be, you know, incredibly difficult to deal with. So, but for a community such as yours, a smaller group of ratepayers, it's just so hard to deal with. So we recognized that and went back to the drawing board and looked at some alternatives to work out. And so let me briefly describe to you how we go through that process of looking through the alternatives, both in the status quo and for the three we're going to discuss with you. We start with your beginning balances for fiscal 15, which would be your ending balances for fiscal 14. They aren't audited numbers yet because your audit isn't through, but we've got a pretty good idea based on what Susan's told you and what Emily has provided in terms of your financials for fiscal 14. We've got a pretty good idea what kind of cash you do or don't have in the bank. And then we look at your projected expenses during the fiscal 15 through 19 period. There's a listing of them there. I don't need to read them to you. You know what they are. So under that scenario, assuming no increased revenue, you can see this graphic shows the projected fund balances in red, these red bars. And you'll notice they're on the negative side of the graph, which is obviously not good. And that black line, which is dwarfed by the magnitude of the graphics there as your 90-day target. The point is, with no increased revenue, under the status quo scenario, you are immediately in desperate situation in terms of your reserve balances. They're very negative in the multiple millions, and it only gets worse from there. Something's got to happen here. Something has to give in terms of increased revenue and or decreased expense, which is what we're going to talk about now for you all, for the scenarios we're talking about. Just to quantify all that status quo stuff with the large increase in revenue requirement, this is what the bill would go to under that plan. From $70 or so right now, I think it's $69.70, to about $154. We're basically talking about a little over doubling of your rates in fiscal 15. This clearly got the attention of all of us on your team. We're not dummies. We understand that that's just not realistic for anyone. Much less a smaller community like this. So recognizing that, we walk through the process of what are the key drivers here, what do we have any control over in terms of reduced costs, and what do we have any control over in terms of increased revenue.
I have a quick question, Jonathan.
Absolutely.
When you did those projections, do those include large capital expenditures for phase 2 and 3? And I don't know what's embedded in that.
Sure, they did. Eric's more capable of describing the detail, but yes, they did. Just as on a blanket statement, they did include those, which the plan we're going to walk you through in a moment defers those, reduces those, and defers those out. There's some risk involved there, and we'd be remiss if we didn't make it very clear that there's a reason those were scheduled sooner rather than later, and by deferring those, there's risk involved. But we're weighing issues here. We're weighing the impact of the customer as well.
Thank you.
So with that scenario is something we just felt like we couldn't put on the table with a straight face and in good conscience. We came up with a couple of ideas that will allow us to do this. And you've seen a graphic like this already in Susan's presentation. But you can see right now we're scheduled to make $2.1 million of annual debt service payments to the state. And our plan is to, like Susan described, is to have a graduated principal payment that graduates up during the forecast period and no interest. And I'm going to speak to, you had a question earlier, and I'm going to speak to that. This is where I'm going to speak to it. The situation of your expenses being balanced with your revenues, and hey, if we're going to have this reduction here from 2.1 million down to 800 some odd thousand or $1 million in fiscal 14 and 15.
why the need for any rate increase? We just saved $1 million or so. The reality was, and I hope I demonstrated that in the status quo scenario, is that we were in dire straits already. We have rate increases for this utility that are likely long overdue. Well, not likely, absolutely. I'm a rate consultant. This is what I do for a living. And the first thing I saw is that, wow, we're looking at something really big here. And as you saw that bill is going from $70 to $154 a month is not, obviously not minor. There was a serious systemic issue going on with this utility's financial condition. And by reducing the revenue requirement, by reducing that debt service, that puts less pressure on the rates. But when you're talking about $3-4 million of revenue gap, reducing debt service by $1 million certainly helps. And it's part of the plan. It's a piece of the pie, but it doesn't wipe everything out. We still needed large rate increases regardless. So I hope I addressed it.
Can I ask a more difficult question?
That's what I'm here for.
So Wildan did our original rate study when we built this plant. How did we get here today? And I hate to put you on the spot, but I really want to know the answer. I mean, we had this plan in place, which, as you know, I was a member of that council that bought into that whole plan. And then today we are, we're comparing to, severe rate increases, going into default, and now having to have a workout plan that could affect our credit. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it. So I'd like to know from you, what are the 3 things that you see that have happened that have put us here? Because I'd like us to learn from it.
Certainly. Well, unfortunately, I wasn't part of that
I
study,
know
and I know you don't know that, but I want to address your question anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop there, I promise. Although I wasn't part of the study, I do believe, and this is, I've spent most of my time working on this workout plan. I haven't done as much preparation for a question like that to be able to just stand up here and say, well, there's clearly some reasons. I'm not going to tell you that there may not have been some issues there.
There's very reasonable reasons. I mean,
Sure.
Costs have increased, revenues haven't. Revenues have been lower. And then, you have this incredible piece of this incredible facility that is really state of the art, that understanding its costs and maintenance operations from when it started to today has been a huge learning curve. And, I think that's really affected it the most, but there seems like there has to be some kind of happy medium to not put a city in this kind of a situation.
Certainly. I believe, again, without having done the investigative looking backwards, which I'm going to do as part of this, we wanted to get a workout plan, focus our energy on that. I can follow up more with you after the fact, but I'll just briefly say, I believe there were a series of rate increases prepared for that may or may not have been implemented. But I'm speaking purely.
No, they were implemented, but they weren't implemented in the time frame that we originally agreed to.
Which ultimately, as you lose months and months of revenue, the delta to get up sometimes increases exponentially to make not only get the revenue you need now, but to make up for lost time. But I can't speak to a specific instance in that report in terms of what we may have missed the boat on. I will look at it absolutely.
Looks like Mr. Weir may have something enlightening to say.
Well, I guess enlightening is all a matter of perspective. I was with the city at that time, not in my current role, but I was with the city during that rate increase, and so I can speak to a number of components in which we've done a better job addressing with this study, as well as just the fact that we have more information now. So we have more information about the plant and how this plant actually operates. Back then, the plant was just under construction, so it was really an estimate on what those operating expenses were going to be. Obviously, the sludge disposal and the amount of time and effort it takes to operate are a lot better known now. Also, the city's financial condition back in 2007, 2008 was a lot different than what it is now, and so the current financial situation of the city is obviously known a lot better. All that being said, we've also done a very good job at trying to address future capital needs this time, which, really at that point, we were trying to just simply get out of the cease and desist order and trying to evaluate the stage 1 improvements. And so at this time, I think we have a lot better handle on a 30-year capital, improvement program in particular. 30 years, like Jonathan has said, is really just it's a guesstimate at this point. But we can focus in a little bit more on the next 5-10 years and have the ability to estimate what those needs are going to be. So I think it really has to do with the information that was put in to the original model.
No, I agree with you. I'm not saying it's the numbers guys that, have brought us here today, but I think that when you work with large firms that are helping build a $37 million plant and putting together a $44 million loan payment plan, and you've got all the pieces to the puzzle, why did we not get that expertise back then that would allow us to make better decisions?
Those are excellent questions. The thing I can speak to now is that we do have the expertise now, and we're on solid ground, and we feel confident in the decisions that are being made and included within this study, and moving forward, the city's going to be a lot better off.
Thank you, Mr. Weir.
Yes.
Mr. Weir. Mr. Barnes.
So, as Susan has said, this graduated principal repayment plan with no interest going forward, and retroactive application of interest to your principal balance, which is pretty incredible, actually. And we're hoping the state will approve this plan because it's certainly a pretty big ask, but we think it's warranted in this case. There are debt service savings around $18.7 million over the life of this loan, which is certainly significant, and will certainly take some of the pressure that would have been otherwise put on the ratepayers over the forecast period and beyond, take some of that off. So let's quickly compare then the breakdown in the alternative. The fully funded plan on the left is what I showed you earlier. And what you can see is we've taken a reduction in our non-operating and capital funding. This is primarily a result of the rework and refinement of the capital plan that Eric and his folks have come up with. Again, that's reducing some capital near term, pushing it out going forward in the future. There's obviously risk involved in that. We say that a lot just to make sure everyone's clear. But at the end of the day, we're trying to mitigate rate increase as well. We walk that line. And then, of course, a very big part of this as well is the reduction in debt service from $2.14 million in 2015 down to around $860,000, give or take. That's the first one we're going to make in 2015. You're still going to make this 2014 payment of $1.1 million, I believe it is, in principal payment. Obviously, what that does is, if you'll remember, we had a revenue line right there, which was very low on the left-hand bar. If you'll remember, we had a very big gap. We've brought that down significantly. And the purpose of that is to come up with a plan that will allow us to have some sort of rate increase that is I use this term, put quotes around it, it's palatable compared to doubling of the rates. So what we've been able to do through that reduction in debt service and through the reprioritization of the capital plan is take that larger increase and put it in getting monthly bills that go up from about $70 a month now to around $74 or so in 2015, 77, 80. These are rounded numbers, of course. This is under Alternative 1. Alternatives 1 through 3 are very similar in nature. Alternative 1 assumes an annual 4% revenue increase in 2016 forward, and then in 2015 it assumes the 3.6 increase that you all have been discussing, plus an additional 3 to get us on board. And I'll just briefly show you that green area is just the savings in monthly sewer bill over this 5-year forecast period, which is significant. And it's a result of the capital plan deferral and the proposed debt service that we're hoping the state will buy in on and be partners with us with respect to. So just to wrap up, that 4% increase does allow us to have adequate working capital reserve. You'll notice these are on the right side of the ledger here in the positive, and allow us to maintain that 90-day reserve. I will point out, under this 4% annual increase scenario, there's a little downward trend in the latter part of the forecast period. You know, we always balance risk with making sure we've got enough money now, but not raising the rates too far and overreacting and overcorrecting, because you don't know what's going to happen 4, 5, 10 years in the future. But there's a slight downward trend under this plan, which is why what we would like to do is we'd like to focus on Alternative 2. Unfortunately, the graphics on this computer are a little off. I apologize. That bar should have been up to Alternative 2. But anyway, Alternative 2 is about a 4.5% increase. So Alternative 1 is about 4% going forward. Alternative 2 is 4.5%. Alternative 3 is 5. We walked the line as your rate consultant in terms of trying to put forth a plan that will allow for some wiggle room, if you will. But in this case, we believe it's warranted not to go overboard with that. We want to stay on a happy medium there, try to take the medium scenario is what we like, only because we want to minimize the impact to the ratepayers as much as possible, but also being good stewards of your financial future at the same time. And typically that means taking the middle ground scenario. I think we go to questions now. I did have a slide in here at one point that reminded us of all the risks involved in this entire plan. You know, we've got risks of maintaining your system, and the more we defer capital and reduce it, we push it out. Obviously, there's a risk there, but there's also a risk of raising the rate so much that it becomes much more of a financial burden than it already is on your ratepayers to pay the rates that are existing. We've got to walk that line. There are risks involved in all that, and obviously all of this is predicated upon the state agreeing to be our partners here and recognizing that we've come up with what we believe is a very thoughtful plan that balances the risks, all those risks we've discussed, and hopefully they'll be our partners with this and put together, you know, a debt service schedule similar to what we've presented here, and allow you all to be able to deal with that. So with that, I guess I would ask.
Can you go back to the last slide?
Sure. Oops. Yes.
Can you tell me between alternative 2 and 3, you know, the rates are pretty close to each other up until fiscal year 18, if you compare the rate increase.
Sure, it's a 35-40% difference.
So, what, 35?
It's 35 or 40 cents difference between the two.
I thought you said percent, I'm sorry.
No. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Maybe I did say that.
What's the benefit if we were to go with alternative 3?
Sure. A very clear benefit is you've sort of hedged your bets against unknowns in the future. But it also, the additional revenue that comes from the additional half percent increase, which again is 35, 40 cents, give or take. The additional revenue could go towards funding additional capital. But by additional capital, I don't mean coming up with new capital projects to prosecute. I mean maybe moving some projects that we've deferred because of financial urgency, maybe bringing some of those back forward, or at least having the ability on an emergency basis to address those issues. Yeah.
It seems like, the reason I asked is it seems like maybe that benefit might far outweigh the dollar difference here and there.
That was our thought process as well, but of course, you're the council, so we present it for your information and let you do what you do best, which is make decisions.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just had a question. The scenario here, all these 3 scenarios, assume that the state excuses the interest payments that have already been paid to the state.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's going to be a whole different matter if that doesn't happen.
If they don't excuse the interest payments that we've made today, which is around $3 million, that will certainly impact this. And impact it significantly. There's no doubt about that. I don't know the exact number. I haven't quantified that. Yeah, it's part of a plan. We want to get not only that credit for that interest paid, but also a reduction in principal. If we don't get the credit for the $3 million or so interest paid to date, those red bars I showed you that were graduated would all have to go up by a little bit. And I don't know what a little bit is, but maybe it's $100,000, and every $100,000 is a big deal to this utility, quite frankly.
Have we done a what-if plan?
What if they don't approve? It's similar to the plan I showed you with the $154 increase. We could still defer some of the capital and move it out, but we haven't quantified that yet because, quite frankly, it seems like such an impossible scenario to conceive that you all would have to have your rates raised that high. We're just hoping the state understands that and hears us loud and clear, which I believe we've transmitted that message loud and clear that we're not negotiating for a used car here. We're laying it all on the table. We're in a situation where we need to be very open and honest, and here's where we are, and we need some help. So we're sure hoping they hear that.
Mr. Palazzo, did you have something?
I guess, getting back to, what we're asking tonight with the action is authorizing the city manager to submit loan modification, request to the state, and in that loan modification request, I think as good stewards of maintaining and operating, our system, the state's going to want to see, how we're going to do that and how we're going to continue to do that over the next 5 years. And this is our proposal to the state. We're not going to know what they're going to say until it does go to their board in October. We're hoping to get on their board agenda in October. So I guess at that point, we get this letter submitted, and hopefully we get some good positive feedback from their staff before it does go to the board.
Thank you. You've given us a lot to digest, as they say, in sewer terms. Do we have any questions or comments of any of the presenters this evening? Okay, thank you very much for being here.
I
and
appreciate
for
your
all
time.
of your hard work. I appreciate it. So, any public comment on this matter?
Donna Westphal, I live in the city, and the one option that should be discussed that hasn't been brought up is bankruptcy. You may need some bankruptcy protection to deal with this whole situation, because if you're going to go to $154, believe me, you're all going to be recalled. And I say that with great confidence as the chairman of the newly formed Crescent City Del Norte County Taxpayers Association. Now, I'd like to address some of the issues that were in your agenda today about 2007, during a period of hyperinflation, that the costs went from 19 to 44 million. Costs may have gone up. Whether or not they doubled, I doubt it. Labor didn't double. And while collecting signatures on the referendum, I still expect a receipt for those signatures submitted, Robin. Many people still think that the bid was fixed and that people like Jim Barnes belong in jail for a number of reasons. In prior council meetings at Kelly, I talked to you, what stage are we in? 1, 2, or 3? Well, it was determined we were in a combination of stage 1 and 2. Now let's talk about the deeply researched grand jury of 2009. No, it was not deeply researched. Their investigation went about that deep. Should have gone about that deep, okay? It was like a kangaroo court, actually. And then you say in here that regardless of the chain of events, no, you need to look at the chain of events that brought you to this current situation. You wanted to slough it off. You didn't want me to micromanage. You weren't asking the right questions. You weren't looking into it, and that's why you are where you are, okay? Next, I understand that our very expensive copper roof on the lab will outlast all of us, but that the problems under the roof are still there, and that things that should have been fixed have not been fixed. And as recently as this month, more things are falling apart. And we still have to look at the $2.5 million lab that was supposed to pay for itself in 2.5 years. Lab has not made a profit yet, not expected to. And then finally, it all goes to the issue of expansion, which ratepayers are not required to pay. So you put the loan on the backs of the ratepayers 100%. Most of this was expansion. We didn't have an MBR system before. Now you spent $30 million plus on an MBR system, which we were told was too expensive to operate. That's about all the time I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Yes.
I'm really sorry to see all this mess go down, but Kelly, you knew, and Mr. Ania, and I don't think Murray was part of it at that time, but she was, for the $44 million endeavor that we created here, and $154, if that is what we actually would have to pay a month, nobody's going to pay that. They'll pay the water bill. You guys should feel ashamed of yourselves, because you put the city in this mess. Not the citizens of the city, but you folks did. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing no other public comment, we'll bring it back to the council. There are certain request the staff have made of us tonight.
I wanted to make one more comment, if that's okay.
Sure.
Recently, I attended a celebration for the president of Humboldt State University, Roland Richmond, that was sponsored by the California League of Cities, Redwood Empire Division. And with that celebration was a presentation about the Arcata Marsh projects. And I found some of the ingenuity that they're using and the scientific work that they're performing to cut their costs and recycle, I think, their sludge was very interesting. And also the partnership that they have with Humboldt State University and bringing interns in to do scientific work and creating, doing surveys and studies using the students from the HSU science departments. And they're looking at regional ways to improve what they're doing. And I think that we have, if you haven't toured the project and met with them, it's very forward-thinking and progressive, and something I think that, I don't know if it would fit here, but I think we could maybe learn from what they're doing and maybe bring some of that back here. And so I just wanted to mention that before we got off the subject.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments.
Mr. Nia.
Ms. Westfall left, but I'll say them and she can listen to them or watch them. She's the new president of the Taxpayers Association here, which is licensed by the state. I don't know any Taxpayers Association. I belong to the one in Contra Costa when I lived there that would want a city to go into bankruptcy. Tax associations are there about excessive taxes, not payments on water and sewer bills. She talked about the chain of events. I'll tell you what the chain of events were. 26 years of doing nothing back in the 70s and 80s. 26 years of the city not doing anything, and that's on prior councils. That's not on this council. When I got on this council in 2010, we wanted to bring things current, and we're doing that. We have 4 budgets: general budget, water budget, our housing authority budget, and the sewer budget. 3 out of our 4 budgets are in the black. They're doing well. It's the sewer budget now. No one is talking about $154 a month bill. We're talking about $3 or $4 a year to raise it. I have every confidence the state is going to do that. They see we're a small town. We live on the coast. We have more things that we have to put into our plan. You've seen that all. You've seen that all. It's no use going over that again. The other thing about the $44 million is because of the inflation of 2007. It doesn't blame anyone for that. That's what it cost. And we had to do it because we were going to be fined by the state every day. There are cities now, small cities that I read about every day, that have to upgrade their plant. And as it says in here, that plant today, if we did nothing for all these years, that plant today would cost $68 million. That's 7 years later. $68 million. And so we're trying to figure a way out of this. There's nothing new in this report. There's nothing new in this report.
I agree with you. And cities are facing this all over the state of California. It's not just us.
It's not just us, and we're just the first.
We're actually behind the 8 ball, really, in dealing with this kind of negative situation. There are so many cities, city council people I talk to all over the state that are in this financial situation, and they haven't even taken care of meeting the regulatory issues and the environmental issues with their plants. And they're very scared on what that's going to look like.
The last point I wanted to make is people continue to blame our former Public Works Director that it's his plant, he wanted it this big for his housing, which is totally untrue. Before we started construction, the state gave us 500 hookups. To this day, 7 years later, have not used all of those hookups. We have 100 plus more left. He finished building his stuff. Had nothing to do with our plant. The reason we had to fix it because we violated the law year after year. And Ms. Sutter, you're wrong about being ashamed. I'm not ashamed of myself. First of all, I didn't vote. I wasn't on the council when this happened. But if I would have been on the council, I would have voted yes, because I don't want the state taking our money. They're not going to come here and close down or take over our plant. They were going to fine us. They can withhold our sales tax, our property tax, and that affects every resident of this community, wealthy or not so wealthy. It affects every single program, so we had to fix it. It's part of the price we pay here for living on the beautiful North Coast. And our rates are still the lowest than anywhere around. And I'm proud of that fact, that we are keeping those prices down. And I only hope that the state is going to listen to us. We're one of the first communities to ask for this, but there's going to be several more communities right behind us because they can't afford this either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nia. I wanted to say, I was playing with the cost of taking a look at the infrastructure and then putting new infrastructure in there, having it cost $68 million. So that means it's going up about $2.3 million a year. We cannot afford to burden our kids and our grandkids with having to build a new plant at some point if we don't maintain it. It's really that simple. At that rate, I was stunned by that what the replacement cost would be. And so I'd like to make that point, and there's been a lot of information given tonight, and some of it very, very interesting that I didn't know before. But what I'm afraid of is people are going to take away a sound bite, and what they're going to take away is $154 a month. That's not being proposed here. Our staff and our consultants have been working on this for months to get this down so it's palatable for everyone. And so I encourage anyone that's in the room or anyone listening on television to go into our website and actually read the documentation that's in there. Because I think if you do, you're going to arrive at the same conclusions that the consultant did. So I just encourage everyone to gather as much information as you can and don't depend on misinformation and sound bites as we go forward. Okay.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, just for Mr. Weir, I am very impressed with what you presented tonight. I've been involved in this for almost 8 years now, and it's been the most complex, confusing, mind-blowing experience. And for you to actually take what has been all of these little pieces of the pie that have changed and fluctuated so many times just since I've been on the council, and to encapsulate it into what you presented tonight in such a clear and succinct fashion is really the first time that's ever happened. So thank you for that.
Okay. If there's nothing else before the council, I believe that staff needs some direction.
Yeah.
Well, I'll move that we authorize the city managers to submit a state loan modification request.
Second.
And continuing, consider the authorization of a principal-only loan payment by August 1st, 2014.
Do we need to do two or just one good? Then I continue my second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to direct staff to authorize the submission of a state loan modification request and to authorize for principal-only loan payment by August 1, 2014. Any further discussion? Okay, this is important. Would you please poll the vote?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ania?
Yes.
Councilmember Shalom?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gastineau?
Yes.
And Mayor Hawley?
Yes. Thank you. And thank everyone that's worked so hard on this project, and we'll be talking with you in the future. Okay, so let's move on with our agenda. We are just about finished. We have legislative matters before us. Any legislative matters that we want to talk about? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to city manager report and city council director.
You know what, actually, I did want to say one thing.
Okay.
So the Redwood Empire Division did submit, what do you call it?
The resolution.
A resolution, thank you.
to the-
Wastewater, I can't think of normal words now. A resolution to the state that will be heard at the September meeting on illegal marijuana grows and how they're affecting our communities. So pretty happy about that, and I hope that it moves forward.
And I received the legislative packet for the league meeting today in the mail, so we'll get that on the next agenda for the city council to take a look at.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, reports from the city council. Mr. Ania?
Just a couple of things. Our El Tico meeting was last week, or the week before, I don't remember. The major thing is that our funding for Highway 199 improvements are very much in jeopardy, and we're trying to work out something with the courts so we can keep that going, but right now it doesn't look that good. And also, attended Promote Our Pool meeting last week, and also attended the Relay for Life event this weekend.
Thank you. Ms. Schlong?
Thank you. We have our Chamber Board of Directors meeting this Friday, but they did do a wrap-up meeting last week on the 4th of July, and just really good news to report all the way around. Increased visitors, increased business around the community. The overall net profit for the Chamber was up, and I can see if Jeff can bring the exact numbers to us maybe at next month's meeting, but great reports from local businesses and hotels. So just really great event for our community. And like I mentioned earlier, I attended the HSU President's retirement farewell. Really great guy. Was sorry that I hadn't met him before. And then the following day attended the Redwood Empire Division meeting at the city of Blue Lake. And I stay there almost every week and had no idea what a cool little kind of place they have there with the theater, and had a good time, really enjoyed that. And I was appointed to the fundraising committee, temporary fundraising committee for the Redwood Empire Division. And my proposal to them on behalf of our city is to have the next fundraiser for the league to be held here. And I think it'd be really cool to actually do a tour of our wastewater treatment plant for all the other cities that may come here. I know a lot of them seem to be interested. But then the actual fundraiser that I will be working on presenting will be exploring the beautiful Klamath River on the jet boat trips, and maybe giving some business to the newly opened Redwood Hotel with a catered traditional salmon dinner. So that's what we'll be presenting on behalf of the city of Crescent City as our option for a fundraiser for our division. The other one on the table, I think, is being speared up by the Fortuna Boys, and they want to do a bocce ball tournament. And that just doesn't sound like nearly as much fun to me. So I'll report back. Let's see. I wanted to mention one other thing. I was thinking about Chief Plack tonight, something that we didn't point out that I think shouldn't be left out, and that is that our K-9 program is supported by a foundation that has been, a relationship has been created and fostered by Chief Plack. And I don't believe that we would have gotten all the funding that we have had for that program without that relationship. And I thought that was worth mentioning. One other thing that he has done that is noteworthy to me is that, after 9/11, there were a lot of terrible things happening around the country. And city council people were being shot, and Chief Plack took his time to put in a protection security plan for our city council because he thought that was important. And ever since then, he's attended every single meeting that he's been around for, and sat back there and just been highly aware of anybody that comes into this council chambers. He has taken our security to heart. I know that there's been times in the past as a city council member where I had someone trying to break into my home, and He was the one there at 11 o'clock at night, you know, and making sure that I felt safe. And he's always taken our council's protection to the highest degree, and I certainly appreciate that. And last but not least, I'm an Army mom. I'm going to be taking my son Saturday down to Sacramento, and he is joining the United States Army, and I'm very proud of him.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Gastineau.
That's hard to follow.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, I was on vacation last couple weeks, but I went to about every public meeting that I had on my agenda.
I'd like to know about the RAF race.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. I did the Del Norte Solid Waste Management Authority meeting on the 9th, and then when we're talking about drought situations, you should try dragging your raft down the river. It's very low, and when you have a heavy raft with a bunch of fat guys on it, you know, it doesn't go very
So
far.
that's why you didn't place first, second, third, 10th, 12th?
No, I didn't do any placement and no unusual raft, and so next year I'm gonna make a lighter raft. I'm thinking of a hovercraft. I think that might be the only thing that'll get down the river, especially with us. But it was a great event, and we had a lot of fun. And then pretty much a lot of the meetings have been moved to the end of the month, so I'll have a better report then, so that's about it.
Thank you.
Mr. Hawley, would you mind mentioning the First Five meeting that we went to
I did
today
not.
also? I forgot to do that.
Yeah, thanks. Solid Waste Management meeting, I attended that on the 9th. We continue to talk about strategic planning, and we're going to have some special sessions in the near future in order to do that, so that we can get to a place where we could hire an executive director. The local transportation commission meeting we attended with Councilmember Murray as well, and it's very disconcerting that we stand to lose about $35 million possibly if we're unable to make those 199, 197 improvements. So we're continuing to work with that and advocate that project go forward. On the 11th, we attended, actually Kelly and Catherine and I and Mr. Palazzo attended the, as she already mentioned, the Redwood Empire Division meeting in Blue Lake. And we had a presentation about energy usage and energy savings, kind of concentrated on the use of vehicles and that kind of thing. So that was interesting. And it's always good to see the leadership, the council leadership in other areas, and we learn a lot from those meetings. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that. We did go down and back, so there was very little expenditure from our budget. And just this afternoon, Kelly and I attended a luncheon with Gabrielle McBean? Yeah, the director of California First Five. It's the first time in 10 years, I guess, that we've had someone from the California State First Five organization there. And we had virtually representatives from every agency in town. Mm-hmm. And we were thanked by First Five for our intervention with the Wonder Bus and some of the other projects that have connections. And actually, Kelly did a really good job of explaining those connections. So that was a really worthwhile luncheon. It was a feel-good couple of hours, and it was a good way to spend time with some community members.
And Mr. Plack was able to talk about the crime-free multi-housing program because she wanted to hear about the partnerships and how First Five was working with other agencies. And so he was able to talk about how that's been a really successful program, and we all got to wave around our magic wand and talk about other things we wish we could do for children ages 0 to 5, and so it was a really good conversation.
I mentioned to Kelly afterwards how eloquent the chief was today, and we look forward to his eloquence in different ways in the future. So thanks again, Chief.
What was eloquent was that he gave everybody else in the room credit for making him look good.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go ahead and take turns with that plaque. There you go. Okay, very good. So I think that's all to come before us this evening. I'll go ahead and close the meeting, and we'll next meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 4th at 6 o'clock here. Thank you.